Welcome to Beyond Belief, Tales of Religious Exodus, where we delve into the personal journeys of people who've left fundamentalist religions. In this series, we explore their experiences within religion, their journey out, and how they found meaning and healing on the other side.
Okay, Aysha, welcome to Beyond Belief.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
I'm excited too. So to start, as we always do, I'd love to hear about your past, your upbringing, maybe where you were raised and what that was like for you.
Yeah, so I am from a South Asian background. I was born and raised in New York City. So grew up in a super multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious community. I had friends from almost all corners of the world. So I was very fortunate in that I was exposed to a lot of different people at a very, very young age. But as for my household specifically, we were sort of a moderate family, and moderate in comparison to when you're looking at the average American family, we would be considered conservative. But then when compared to other Muslim families in the area, we were a little bit liberal. So it's kind of like the barometer is a little bit skewed, you know? We ate halal at home, but outside, we were the only Muslim family that I knew of that ate hamburgers at McDonald's, which was very sort of controversial. I did not wear shorts or skirts with bare legs after the age of 9. My mom made sure that we knew sort of the basic tenets and we knew the necessary prayers, but we weren't obligated to pray 5 times a day. And my dad didn't go to the mosque, but we did. My parents did fast during Ramadan, but as children, we weren't really forced into it. It was just sort of it's good to do it. But that was not the case for other South Asian Muslim families. So it was an interesting, reflecting back on my childhood, it was a very interesting one. And I think that's why one of the reasons I was able to leave Islam is because I had such early exposure to different walks of life, and then also not just with the outside community, but within my community too.
Yeah, it's a classic. It's used as an argument by the more conservative sects of at least in Judaism. Yeah, of course, because you got to do X, Y, and Z. You got to eat McDonald's. It starts with eating McDonald's, and then you end up not religious at all.
Yeah, it's really funny. I find so much empathy from the ex-Jewish community, more than any other community. So it's always such a joy to for that type of empathy, because you understand the experience. It may not have been as extreme as ours, but you get it. And I really appreciate that.
Exactly. I likewise, I was very validated. So this show started, I've been vehemently anti-Jewish for a long time. And then, and I guess I have to explain that's anti-Judaism, because Jews and Judaism are intertwined in a very unusual way. But when I started this podcast, I was I want to interview everybody. But of course, everybody in my surroundings is still Jewish. And then beyond that, one layer out is Christian, because that's the immediate availability. And certainly Jewish with the politics as they are, Muslims were already one step further, and that includes ex-Muslims. When I finally had an ex-Muslim on the show, it was so eye-opening, because half the fuckery that I had to deal with as an Orthodox Jew is actually Muslim flavored. And the way I describe it is Judaism stands in between Christianity and Islam, as far as a little bit more or more influence of Christian philosophy. You can see that right there. A lot of the apologetics, a lot of the way that the connection to the Bible and how they speak about the Bible is kind of Christian, along with heaven and hell in its current format. But a lot of the laws, the obsession with laws and doing things, Christians need to do almost nothing. They need to feel guilty. And they need to maybe go to church, and that's pretty much it. But Islam, like Judaism, has so many laws that you need to follow all the time. And there's a certain hellfire and brimstone that I think I associate with Islam and Judaism more so. I know Christianity has its hell, but it doesn't scare me as much as a Jewish and Muslim hell.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that. So I actually attended Catholic school for a couple of years, and I used to volunteer at a synagogue. So I'm familiar with the rituals and the practice and the actual religious texts. So when I would be like in Catholic school, like reading the Bible, I was like, wait, all of this stuff that we do, not eating pork, staying away from shellfish, like women covering, all these things exist in the Bible, but you guys have just, for some reason, decided to ignore all of it and you're fine.
Yeah.
And
Which is, yeah.
it's insane. Like, I feel like the Quran is the perfected word of God, right? Like God says in the Quran that I sent down the Torah and I sent down the gospel and you corrupted it. And so this is my third and final attempt to send you my most perfect version of a religion.
So yeah, I mean, Christianity is just the second version. It's like, we're going to throw out that early book and we're going to do a new one. It's actually, I think, more surprising that they still read the Old Testament at all. Like, it's like, just throw it out. Like, why this homage to it, but then we're not going to follow it? That's just like neither here nor there.
Yeah.
As a side question, I've always been curious, and I've asked Christians this, and they don't really know what I'm talking about, but you might get this. In Judaism, there's like a certain like core laws that almost everybody observes. It's like, I mean, it's a trickle down, it's a pyramid, but it like goes down to like the very few on top. I heard you even list some of those today, but would you summarize like the ones that like the most basic Muslims are like supposed to do?
Yeah, so it'd be the 4 pillars of Islam, and you're really putting me on the spot. Even though there are only 4, I hope I get them right. It's taking the Shahada. I testify that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger, and that's how you become Muslim. So if you recite that, you're automatically in the cult. The second is fasting. The third is performing Hajj. Fasting during the month of Ramadan, performing Hajj, which is obligatory on all people who can afford it. And that's a whole separate scam. Like people spend tens of thousands of dollars doing this, and then there's an entire economy that exists, and then a gray market for that also. And then charity. So zakat is at the end of Ramadan, it's like a certain percent. It's like a tilth basically that you pay, but it's almsgiving. It's given to the poor. So there's an entire like economy that exists that takes your money and then distributes it. But I think a lot of people, what they do is they distribute it within their neighborhood. So it's sort of like small scale giving. And then in addition, the wealthier people have more to give. They usually give to like larger charities. So those are the 4 that are obligatory that like every observant Muslim would do.
So you didn't even mention halal. So interestingly, it ranks lower.
Yeah. And in fact, in the Quran, it says that you're allowed to eat Jewish meat. So kosher becomes halal where halal is not available. So growing up, we used to eat a lot of Hebrew National, like salami and hot dogs. I still love Hebrew National. I think it has the best hot dog.
That's awesome. That's really great. So it sounds, yeah, like you had a fairly liberal upbringing, all things considered. So what was it like for you, kind of in between these worlds?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up like cultural, and I would put that in air quotes because culture, and I think ex-Jews appreciate this more than anyone else. Culture and religion in Islam are so hard to disentangle. They inform each other. And so when I say that I had a cultural upbringing, that means when I attended family events, I wore traditional shalwar kameez. So that would be like the long tunic, loose pants, and then a shawl that would cover my chest. And so would my mom. I would never wear jeans and a t-shirt. So that was culture, but it's also religious because it's part of the modesty culture that's enforced on women, right? And then we ate like traditional foods at home. And so, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Was it good for you? Did well, I'll ask you more like, because you did leave, but like when you think back on that time, is it mostly nostalgia, for example?
I mean, it kind of was because it was like, I grew up in like a tight knit community. Like I had I hung out with my family a lot. And I came from a really, really big family. So I have a nostalgia for that too. And, in the 80s and 90s when I was growing up, Islam was your anchor, but it didn't control you as explicitly as it does now for my family. And what I mean by that is my family has become increasingly religious, and there is a certain Arabification of our traditions and our culture that has happened because of this desire to emulate. And I call like Arabs are our overlords, but like wanting to become more Arab because Arabs were the Quran was revealed in Arabic to the people that needed it the most, and those were Arabs. So, and the Quran is revealed in Arabic, and I don't know if you know this, but only 15 to 20% of Muslims are Arab. So the rest of us rely on translations, and we'll never get it right because will most certainly never be native Arabic speakers. So it's, we're getting like secondhand information essentially. So there's this like element of Arab supremacy that is also happening within the Muslim community, the non-Arab Muslim community. I long for that a lot, like the times where I really felt connected to my culture, where like you could listen to music is haram. You could, where my family's originally from India, we could wear saris. Saris are now considered, well, what Hindu women wear. So now we wear shalwar kameez exclusively, unless it's for like significant events. And even then the blouse basically looks like a t-shirt, where saris are very short blouses. But now, because it doesn't adhere to the modesty rules, now women in my family wear saris that are like long sleeved and all the way, they cover every bit of flesh. And it's like, I miss those times when culture had a larger share in my upbringing than religion did.
So culture and religion will always be like intertwined, but to the degree that it's culture without religion or less religion is more pleasant. And the more it gets sort of wraps its hand around it, the more it's inescapable.
Yeah, like I go to family. I don't mean to skip ahead, but I go to family events now, and the topics that are being discussed is like, is cryptocurrency halal? And I'm like, you guys, what is happening? You think a book written 1400 years ago by an illiterate man in the desert is going to reveal to you whether it's halal for you to buy Bitcoin now? This is a farce.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because most Jews are not Orthodox Jews. I don't know if people, when they think Jews, they often think of like, this more than others.
Yeah.
Like they think the beard and the thing, but most Jews are not like that. And so most Jews have a mostly cultural experience of Judaism, and certainly the major holidays are a lot of that. And then they say to me things like, why can't you just do the fun stuff? Just do Hanukkah. What's wrong with Hanukkah? And it's like, you don't understand. Every aspect of the funnest holidays was ruined because religion was put there. So for Jews, it's like, how much oil is in it? And is it the time that it's ready to light? And then I have to go back to school after I've lit the candles and go study even more. So you take something that is like literally built for fun. It's all like, that's where it probably originally came from. It's just humanity was doing this thing, and religion kind of got its paws on it. And it's fascinating to observe in such a short time frame, right? A radicalization, as you're kind of describing it. And Noura in the previous episode talked about the same thing. Like apparently it was a trend in like the 90s, 2000s of this like shift.
Yeah, for me, it was September 11th that really did it, forced this fork in the road for Muslim communities, especially for, I think, non-Arabs in particular, because we had to choose. We're being asked, are you Muslim and what is Islam about? So now there's like this national and international spotlight on what does Islam actually teach these people, right? So now we're having to answer outwardly, externally. And it forced people to be like, well, some parts of my culture run counter to my religion, but my religion tells me that this trumps everything, this usurps everything, right? So now I have to make a decision. Am I going to live a good Muslim life, or am I going to live a life of ignorance? And most people that I know in my circle went right. They chose the path of Islam. And so there was an incredible amount of regression that happened when I was in college. The September 11th happened, I'm dating myself now, but on my very first day of university. So as a freshman, I was in the dining hall when I heard the second plane crash into the tower. And it was an incredibly traumatizing time. And I was very close to New York City. So, all flights were grounded, and I saw like military planes flying over my campus. And from my house, I could see like the smoke. There's that tension. There's a tension where you're being asked about your religion, and then there are people who are openly hostile to you in an academic setting, in a classroom setting, and I'm just trying to figure my way out. And I saw so many of my peers decide that they were going to choose religion, and then that meant wearing the hijab, segregating themselves from men and boys who they were fine with. Literally on September 10th, it was fine. And now they're refusing to attend group dinners because they don't have their brother present, who is their mahram, who will make sure that they are in line and following Islamic protocol. And, if my brother's not coming, then I can't come. And I was like, this is utter bullshit. Like, you were total, nothing was happening. And I was like, I was so like straight-laced when I went to school. Like I lived on campus, but I didn't drink. I didn't have a boyfriend. I hung out with other girls, and I just did my homework, and I took my tests, and I went home every weekend. We weren't doing anything lascivious, but like this like intense need to like, no, I really need to follow the straight path and follow Islam. It was just, that to me was just like, I saw the regressiveness in it, and I was like, why are we going backwards? Like, we're fine. Why are we going backwards? And that's where, like, I think intellectually I started to have that awakening. And then there are other things that happened at university. Like, I took an Islam 101 course, and I approached, and then that class, which was the professor from his name was Muslim, but I now look back and I think he was an ex-Muslim. He approached the text, the Quran, as an academic text and not historical, not religious. And as a non-Arabic speaker, I had never read the Quran in English. Like, why would I, right? The Arabic is the most perfect language, is what we were taught. It's the most beautiful and it's the most perfect. So why would I read it? Why would I read an abrogation? So now I'm in class and I'm having to read the Quran in English, and everything that I had believed up to that point, there was a lot of like anti-Western propaganda happening in the late 90s and early 2000s. And I remember thinking, oh, like the wife beating and the sexual slavery and the quote unquote miracles of the Quran, that's all anti-Islam Western propaganda, because they're trying to take Islam down, and I'm not going to fall for it. I know my religion is superior. Those things don't actually exist. And then I read it in black and white. If you fear disobedience from your wives, first admonish them, then remove them from your bed, then beat them. So it's sanctioning verbal abuse, emotional abuse, and physical abuse. And it's in there. And when I would go to like my cousins who were of the same age to me, and I would show this to them, they're like, no, but there must be another meaning for this, right? There has to be this is just wrong. And I couldn't wrap my brain around. I was like, but I'm sure it's right here. It's in black and white, a language that we understand. And this is what it's saying. And you're telling me that this is the divine word of God, that God is giving my husband authority to beat me if he fears disobedience? Like, what does that look like? Like, he asked me to make chicken for dinner and I made fish, so he beat me? Like, I'm sure that happened. Like, I'm making light of it, but it does. And then, my own dad was very abusive, and he was, at some points he was a skeptic, and I think that's what he lit that spark in me. And then other ways he used Islam as a cudgel to keep us in line so it was very convenient for him. And the Quran is perfect for someone like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I've written about how religion's like a giant stick. I used a bit more of a vulgar thing. I'm not going to subject you to that. But it's wielded by people. It by itself is sort of lying on the ground, and it is how you use it. And so it's an observation that, it's abusive, but it's a book. So what a book isn't going to hit you. It's a person who takes the book and wields it as they wish. And it's oftentimes their own mental health and their own human flaws that get justified and used and utilized that way. So it sounds like there was a combination, because he's not even that religious most of the time. But, when it's relevant and practical, of course, he can fall back on that.
And that's a major flaw with the religion itself. Muslims love saying it's not Islam, it's Muslims. And it's like, no, the issue is with the owner's manual, not with the user. Like, if this many people are having problems, it's the owner's manual.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Yeah, they said don't. I was raised on the exact same like apologetics. Like, don't confuse Jews with Judaism. And I'm like, I don't know. They're both kind of assholes. I
It's like
won't confuse the two. They both suck.
that's such like
Yeah.
intellectual dishonesty where you're like you're not even engaging meaningfully with the topic. Like I'm showing you in black and white what the harmful thing, and you're telling me no, it doesn't exist. And it's like I'm like, am I crazy? Like that's the journey out of faith. I'm sure you can relate is so isolating because you struggle for so long because you're like, am I crazy? Am I the crazy one? How does no one else see this? You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, exactly. One piece that I guess I'm missing from your story is, had you read the Quran until then in other languages? What was it about that was your
Yeah.
first time? What was it about the English specifically that didn't?
So shouldn't say every, I shouldn't speak in absolutes. Most Muslim children and most South Asian Muslim children will have what is called a Bismillah. So that's considered a ceremony from when you first open the Quran and you read the first word, which in the Quran is Bismillah. And before that, you learn your Arabic letters. And then it's usually your mom who does the instruction at home, like on the weekends or in the evening. So I received religious instruction from my mom to be able to learn the letters and then join them together and then read words. No one tells you the meanings. So you might as well learn Chinese and then recite Chinese without ever knowing a Chinese person to explain to you the meaning of the word. So you're reading it, and then your parents will listen to recitation in their native language. But if you are born and raised in the West and you have conversational proficiency in that, your parents' native language, you're not able to listen to something that is being recited at an academic level.
Yeah,
You're not gonna
very poetic.
understand. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're not gonna understand it. So I could pick up bits and pieces, and the things that I remember most were the descriptions of hell, which is like boiling water will pour down on you. You know, you will be set ablaze again and again and again. And those are I mean, I understood that because obviously it's very violent imagery. But everything else, you sort of like in one ear, out the other. So reading it in English, obviously I'm a native English speaker, was to me so radical. And but why would I need the other thing is like there's this like almost like this veil that's been created because the Quran is in Arabic and it needs to stay in Arabic, which is that there's this like mysticism around it, right? That you will never fully understand. That's by design. So that kind of like, it kind of diminishes your desire to be able to fully understand. You sort of hand that authority off to other people, right? So that's how these like councils exist, these imams exist. There's an entire classification of like Islamic scholars, right? There's like muftis and whatever else. I forget what all the categories are. But they're the ones who interpret the text for you. And they're the ones who then bring forth proclamations, and they tell you they operationalize the Quran. You don't do that for yourself. As much as Islam likes to claim that there's no intercessionary, like how the Catholics have, like you go to a priest and then the priest tells you what to do, or you pray to a saint and that saint takes those prayers up to God. That doesn't happen. And in fact, the Quran, like that's like, it says, this is directly to you. There's no one else between you and me. So there's that element of like, of mystery that surrounds it. So why would I need to read it in English? Like someone else is going to tell me what to do.
it's like they deliberately want your eyes to kind of glaze over.
Yeah.
It's in their interest. Again, Judaism has like such a classic parallel with that. I wrote an article on like the 3 excuses that you're given for everything if you have a question. And one of them is it's Kabbalistic. And that's basically Jewish mysticism, which was an invention a couple hundred years ago that was just added on, probably in reaction to like, probably like Arabic philosophy and Christian philosophy. And somebody just threw that in, and it was invented. Of course, it was then backdated that it was a secret that was uncovered as a classic move. But the basic premise was that you have to be at least 40 was one of the arguments to even open up this Kabbalistic book. And so like automatically there's ageism locked in there, and you're basically told, oh, on a Kabbalistic level, we could explain that to you, why this thing is not abusive or why it's not bad, but you can't take it at face value. There's a whole deeper world going on that you don't know. So that's it. We've reduced your intellect to 0. And it's, trust us all over again.
Yeah.
So I relate a lot to that. So yeah, that really gives me context. I was going to ask you why you think that there was a divergence in your college years where everybody went one way and when you went the other. And this is a very personal question. Like for you,
Yeah.
like what was it for you that caused that?
I think I was always a skeptic. I think I was always observing and watching how people reacted or how people conducted themselves versus how you were told to conduct yourself. And then also, I had so much exposure to people who were doing things that were very obviously against Islam, like wearing shorts as a girl aged 12. And I'm seeing my peers wear shorts and dresses and they're fine. No one's they're not like spontaneously combusting. It just like the rules just didn't make sense to me as to why they needed to be that way. If the rules are meant to keep me safe, safe from what? And also, other people are not doing those things and they're still living successful, productive lives, free from harm. So why do these rules only apply to me and why are they so severe? It just didn't make sense to me. And yeah, it just didn't make sense to me. And so I saw that. And then I was also like reading the Quran and seeing that all of the things that I had been told were lies and didn't exist, seeing them there, it just made me feel like, how can I ignore that? How can I ignore this truth? And then there's like a funny story. I was actually, when preparing for this talk with you, I was thinking about like, what was it? Like, when can I think back? When was the first time that I first developed like the skeptical attitude? And for a short period of time, I was enrolled in a madrasa, basically. It was run by an imam who taught all these kids how to read the Quran. And I must have picked up like this pamphlet or piece of paper. Must have been in a book, and I brought it home, and I showed my dad. And it was like, U.S. surgeon performs heart surgery on patient and finds the word Allah written on his heart and immediately converts to Islam. And I went to my dad and I was like, look, Baba, isn't this amazing? Isn't it amazing that this happened? And he looked at it and he was like, that's not true. And I was crushed. I was like, why would someone lie about God? Why would someone create propaganda for me to believe in God? Shouldn't I just want to believe in God? If you're lying and you need me to believe in this lie, you fabricated this lie and you need me to believe in it, then clearly the thing that I'm supposed to be believing in isn't that strong.
I love that. First of all, kudos to your dad, as much as it sounds like he's a complex figure, for having that amount of clarity. We had this was actually in our bathroom, which is very interesting that ended up as a bathroom reading. It was a free book given to us by one of these big local charities. As you know, charities are a huge business, right? There's actually a lot of money to be made in the charity business, cutting off the top or whatever it might be. And it was an entire book called I Promised and I Was Saved. And it's just tale after tale of people who were in various predicaments, whether they couldn't find their car keys or they were diagnosed with cancer. It's all the same. And they pledged money specifically to this organization and were saved. And it was an entire book of this. And it was like the propaganda. I was like, here, call 1-800, give to, so that was one thing. But yeah, our culture was full of those like tales of salvation and mystical signs. I love the Cohen brothers. They're secular Jews. They're not religious at all, but they have enough culture that they can tap into that and actually subvert it a lot of times. I don't know what it means to them, but when I watched, there's a movie called A Serious Man, which is basically the modern day still telling of the book of Job, a man who he's kind of like secular Jewish and all this suffering befalls him and he starts going to different rabbis for advice and they all just give him the shittiest advice. But there's one scene you reminded me of where the rabbi just tells him the story of a dentist who reaches into his patient's teeth and sees words in Hebrew at the back of the person's teeth, and it's nonsensical, and the client isn't even Jewish, so it goes nowhere. But I think it's a parody of what you were describing.
It's amazing. I gotta sign that.
Just here for that. Yeah. Serious Man is one of my favorite films. So, okay. So you're raised with a certain amount of skepticism. It worked for you? You were able to keep it together until college is kind of what I'm hearing, like despite the various questions.
Yeah, yeah. And then I went on this 20-year long journey to try and make Islam fit. And that's a pretty common experience amongst all Muslims. Like our detractors love to say that, like, we did it was automatic and then we just wanted to have sex and be whores and sluts. And it's like, give us some credit, please. I did it on my own merit. And also I struggled. I really tried to make it work. And I mean that sincerely. Like, I tried so hard. And it wasn't because I was scared, or maybe it was. Maybe there was an element of fear, but it wasn't like, oh, if I lose Islam, I'll lose everything. It was more like, no, but I was told this is right. I was told this is right, so I have to make it work. I have no choice. This is the immutable, inerrant word of God. This is God in this book, and I have to make it right. So I tried. I went to like random, I would read modern interpretations of the Quran. I would read commentary. I read feminist interpretations, like everything you can imagine. I was like, I got to shoehorn this into my life somehow. But I describe it as holding on to stand. Like the tighter your grip is, the more quickly it falls out. And that's what eventually happened, was I was just like, doubt after doubt after doubt. And you sort of plug one hole and then another one appears until like at the end, you're looking at, Swiss cheese and you're like, just let go. It's easier to let go than go through the exhaustion of the mental gymnastics of, okay, I think I found an interpretation that I'm just okay with, just enough to move on. But then something else happens, and then something else happens, and then something else happens. And then it was just exhausting. And I'm like, but what am I holding on to? This thing is telling me that my husband has a divine right to physically harm me. And you're telling me that this is God's word. And then also that it's wrong about so many things about like our physical world and our bodies. And I'm like, but if every single star in the sky, every blade of grass, every feather on every bird was created by God, and you're telling me he doesn't even know where the fuck sperm comes from, how am I supposed to believe this book?
Yeah. My favorite in the Old Testament. It took me years to even notice this because I was taught it so young that I didn't even question it. But in the Genesis story, first God creates trees, and then the day after he creates the sun. And it's gold.
I mean, how? I just don't understand. And then the other thing is that I took like a psychology class, and I was like, how can you be a Muslim psychiatrist and not like diagnose Muhammad in your head? Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah, it's a good one. Actually, I have a claim. Like I trained as a therapist and I'm in the mental health field. And I believe that a devoutly religious person should not be a therapist because they basically have in their hierarchy of priorities, it's going to be God over man, right? And if it is God over man, you can't truly give the person what they need on a subjective level. I remember I was still religious when I was training, and we had all of us. It was a group of men training separately so that we didn't have to interact with women to be therapists because there weren't enough in the Orthodox Jewish community. And we all had to grapple in a slightly more modern environment. Like the teachers were a little bit more liberal, but we were all grappling with what happens when a gay person comes to us and wants to be treated, and it's against our values to even support that at all. How do we do that? I remember early on, I was looking for a practicum placement, and I went to a teenage kind of like a teens youth at risk support center, and again, technically he was religious, but he was like, what would you do if a teenager came in and said that they want to get an abortion? Very common in that world. And I was like, I don't know. I'm so conflicted. I don't know what to do, right? Because God versus man. And I'm thinking of a therapist here in Toronto who just writes these horrific articles in the name of God about how to live your life, right? And so I think you should get disbarred. If you can, like, every therapist is supposed to take basically an ethical oath, not an actual oath like a doctor, but they're committed to a set of ethics. They've already committed to another set of ethics that is antithesis to half of what they're supposed to be doing. Straight up.
Yeah, I mean, like most South Asians, a good number of my family members are in the medical profession, and I'm like, I, I have heard some things from them about certain types of people that they treat, and they have very real biases against people. I'm not saying that all Muslim physicians are like this or they behave in prejudicial ways, but they would not be saying these things about people if they were with their other non-Muslim colleagues. But yeah, I mean, you have an inherent bias when you're deeply religious and you're working with lots of different people who you're supposed to be caring for. I don't know how you make that work. I really don't.
Yeah. So you mentioned like a 20-year journey. Was it like gradually falling apart, or was it like a turning point where you tried, and then it's like, okay, I give up?
I was trying to think about that, and it feels like it was so long ago, and then also like yesterday. So I think I probably formally, if I go back, it's funny, if I go back through my emails, I can find the email that did it. It was probably around like 2014 where I was like, I think I'm done. I think I'm actually letting go. I think I have found enough problems and it's caused me enough problems to like let this thing go. And so I did. And then I kind of like bounced around a little bit. Like in my head, I was like, but what am I? What am I? What am I? I still need like a home. Yeah, we're human. We need community, but I'm not going to fill that void with another religion. I just can't. Like if I can dismantle one religion, how can I not turn that same eye towards another? So I do understand people need to do that. They have a need and they do convert and they find something else. But for me, I felt like I would be dishonoring myself by choosing another religion. So my boyfriend at the time, now husband, he told me, he's never Muslim, and he told me, he said, you should, and I would just like rail at him all the time about Islam. He was like, listen, I hear you, but I don't understand, and you need to talk to people who understand you. And he was like, you should go and find a subreddit. And I was like, what's a Reddit? And he was like, there's a Reddit for everything. So he told me, there's a Reddit for everything. There must be some for ex-Muslims. In fact, I know there is. I was like, okay. And then I found a ex-Muslim subreddit and my mind was blown. There were thousands of people, and not just thousands of people, they were openly mocking and blaspheming against Islam. And at the beginning, that was for me so hard to stomach. Like, I've left Islam, but I never insulted it, in that way, in the way that I saw people doing online. But it was also unbelievably freeing to be like, okay, so what if I see a cartoon drawing of Muhammad? I'm not going to burst into flames. It's okay. And in fact, the first time I saw it, it's such a shock. It's such a shock to your system because you just do not do that. And so like seeing things like that and like learning more and more about like Muhammad as a person and like how he is absolutely a product of his times and that he is barbaric and disgusting, but also incredibly savvy, was to me like eye-opening. And then I learned about ex-Muslims of North America, and I reached out to them and I said, at the time they were running support groups. And so then I applied to be a member, and there was like a double screening process. And I remember I felt so like secretive and such a heavy, heavy burden to be like, one, tell someone with a Muslim name that you are an ex-Muslim, and then have them listen to your story with all of your personal identifying information, and then let you into a club with other people who've done the same thing as you. I was like, for sure, this is a trap. For sure, this is a trap. Then someone's going to tell someone and, I'm dead. Like, literally.
You're going to get dismembered in some Saudi embassy.
Yeah, exactly. Not a joke. It's real. I was like, yeah, like, and then I met other ex-Muslims in person. And that to me was just like, unbelievable. That was just, I could not grasp. I was like, there are so many of us. And we left this thing that just ruled our lives, and we left it. And it was a prison that we had created ourselves. When we just walked through the door, the door wasn't locked. We just opened and we walked through. And imagine like how much more fruitful and productive my life has been since that time. Like, I'm not scared. I'm not scared. I get on these, like, sometimes these, like, my family does, like, sometimes they'll do, like most Muslim families, like, during the pandemic, these group Zoom calls, when they also always end with a prayer. And the things that, like, I hear that it's just like, God, forgive me for this. Please, Allah, forgive me for this. Allah, forgive me for this. Allah, forgive me for, and it's just like endless. It's like a litany of things that are just so fucking pointless. And I'm like, all this time that you spend praying and crying and worrying about something to someone that doesn't give one fuck about you, does not care. And all of the things that you have achieved is through your own effort. And you're discounting all of that. And you're giving credit to something that does not exist. To me is just, my God. I can only make it through, like, 10, 15 minutes of those calls. And I'm like, I can't.
I love how you phrase that. I've never heard it so succinctly said, but it's true that with a religious mindset, I certainly remember this from a childhood, you give up all of the positives that you have in your life, whether it's your own talents or your successes, and you hand them to God and you said, oh, thank God I'm so successful. But then whenever you fuck up, it's all you. It's all your own fault. And that economy, that one way, the first thing jumps to my mind. I remember seeing a kind of blanket on the beach. It was really cool. If you dump sand on the top, the sand only goes one way. So you put it on the beach and the sand doesn't come through. But if you put any sand on top, it just goes one way. Very cool technology. And I would argue that religion is basically that. So for your self-esteem, where anything of yours gets handed off to God and nothing good comes to you, as far as, like, obviously good things can happen, but you can't take any credit for them or build yourself up because of them.
Yeah. It's like, it just consumes, you're just like, you're just constantly aware of, like, am I on the right path? Am I on the right path? Am I on the right path? And that's how you get into these conversations of, is cryptocurrency halal? It's like, there's nothing left for you to be able to judge on your own accord. Islam does a fantastic job of, like, dismantling your moral compass, your inner intuition, that voice. And then it tells you that any doubt that you're experiencing is the devil, is evil, is your weakness. And so it destroys your sense of self.
Yeah.
And I find that that's the most harmful thing, is then what other things are you then capable of?
Right.
Of atrocious things, because you believe. And the thing is, this, I think, becomes the best example that I can think of is the Bondi Beach attack, in that clip where you see the Syrian immigrant try and take down the shooter, right? And everyone's praising the Syrian immigrant, his name is Ahmed al-Ahmad, for being such a good Muslim. And my comment on that is, he's the bad Muslim. The good Muslim is the one who is gunning down Jews. That's because he's following God's commandment. He's taking retribution against the Jews for their crimes against Muslims.
Yeah.
The bad Muslim is the one who stopped him.
Exactly. He's the guy who was so liberal, for whom religion did not have enough of a grip on him that he was able to listen to his own self. Basically, is how I would describe it from the outside.
Yeah.
I love that. that is, yeah. I don't even have a better example than that. I was going to actually ask you, and this feels like a good place to ask it. There's a lot of, like, it's a bit more of a broad question, but there's a lot of accusations thrown around Islamophobia, right? And I was going to ask you, is that even a valid accusation? Because if Islam should be scary, like, Islam is scary, right? Is it even a phobia?
So I have a real problem with that word, and organizationally, we're trying to encourage people who care about the topic to stop using Islamophobia. The term was, as far as I know, and please correct me if this is incorrect, Islamophobia is a term that was created by a white academic to explain prejudice and discrimination against Muslims. So it had a very well-meaning intention, but what has happened is that it now conflates any criticism of Islam with racism, which is beyond stupid because Islam is not a race and neither are Muslims, right? As being bigoted. And if you care about the topic, if you care about Muslim persecution, bias, bigotry, which are very real things that do happen, then please use the term anti-Muslim bigotry, because that actually is explaining what's happening to real people while still preserving my right as an ex-Muslim to critique the religion. And so I understand that there's lots of sensitivities around it. And, it sort of feels like with Mamdani winning the New York City mayor election, it feels like September 11th all over again, and that everyone is hypersensitive about criticizing anything Muslim or Muslim adjacent or Islam. And that's a form of racism. That's like what's called like the soft bigotry of low expectations. Like, oh no, that's your religion and your culture and I can't comment on it, so I'm just not going to. But whatever you tell me about it is actually true. And
beautiful, automatically beautiful.
Yeah.
Wonderful thing. It's yours. You've been doing it for hundreds of years and you just have a full right. And that's just how it is.
Yeah. And if I am a person who lived through it, who, experienced harms from it, and I tell you that, no, these awful things about about it do actually happen and they exist not only in the communities, but in the religious text itself. And you're going to tell me that I'm a racist and I'm a bigot.
Exactly.
It's just crazy to me. So, that's sort of become a personal crusade of mine, which is please stop using that term. Islam does not deserve protection. People do. So
that's the key of the word bigotry, as in bigotry implies that you're hating on an individual person here because of your predisposed beliefs against them. And that's what adds clarity to the term.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. But the other thing I want people to also understand is that ex-Muslims, by virtue of our physical appearance and our Muslim names, also experience anti-Muslim bigotry, right? So it's an issue that affects, and then also so do Hindus and Sikhs, by people who don't know the difference.
Yeah.
So they also experience it, right? So this idea that this is an issue that only belongs to Muslims is false. I am committed to the idea that I oppose anti-Muslim bigotry, but I highly, highly doubt that any Muslim is willing to also stand up for my right to blaspheme and apostatize from Islam. But I also understand that, there are serious consequences to saying that, a certain group of people deserve the right to be able to dissent from religion when punishment for dissent is baked into the religion.
Yeah. So they're stuck in that place. They're stuck not being allowed. But it's also absurd to me that, again, I could go on for hours on this topic, but it's absurd. They subvert liberal values and say, well, as a liberal, you should accept me for who I am, while touting a completely illiberal belief. And I respond with I'm liberal to other liberals. I'm accepting of all other people who will let people live and let live. But I can't be liberal to you with your entire oppressive belief system. That's one thing I can't tolerate. And I'll take a step further. I'm not ex-Muslim. I don't have the privilege that you have in that regard. I can still stand here and say, fuck Islam.
Yeah.
Right? Why do I need to have personally been oppressed? Why is it enough for me to open the book just like you did and say, fuck this book? And so it's completely politically incorrect for anyone to talk about anything other than their lived experience. Right? I was no, I hate all religions equally. I like to reassure people.
I love saying that, XMNA is an atheist organization and we are equal opportunists when it comes to criticizing religion. No. So, the far right, the evangelical Christians are so happy to meet me. And I'm like, no, fuck Christianity.
Yeah. My father, interestingly, one of the biggest voices of anti-Islam is actually fundamentalist Christian, as you just referred to. And my father has an entire nonprofit dedicated to doing two nonprofits. One promotes Judaism, and he tends to be liberal about it, but his own views are far more conservative. And the second mirror, almost image of it, is criticizing radical Islam. And that's his commitment in life. And I was like, listen, that's kind of a worthy cause. I don't know if what you're doing is actually helping, because he just kind of traumatizes people further. But you don't get the chance and the right to call it out because you are in like a sister religion that is almost as bad, not quite as violent, but you have the same homophobic beliefs. And then he makes pinkwashing films about like how Islam's treat Muslims so terribly. And then he's playing for like a Messiah. Jews nowadays don't treat gays as bad as like Muslim countries do, but he's praying for the Messiah to come every day. And when the Messiah comes, the goal is for all the laws that we currently can't keep should be returned, of which is capital punishment, stoning gays, and all
Yeah.
that stuff. It's like you're just one step removed. You're just in abstraction instead of reality.
Yeah.
You don't get to preach against Islam.
Yeah. Your dad praying about the Messiah reminds me of something that someone in my family said. This is a person who was, a medical professional who went to high school in the U.S. And when talking about, I forgot, must have been talking about the presidential election or something, and she made a comment about the candidates, and then she said, "We just have to pray for the day where the whole world accepts Islam." And it wasn't like malicious or nefarious. I want to caveat that, but it's this undercurrent, this belief that like, yes, it's going to happen and the world will be correct. The world will be righted and we just have to wait for that day. But in the meantime, I'll be here waiting.
Exactly. Yeah, a classic. It's a classic. I was raised in a very messianic environment, and you're just like waiting for the Messiah to show up. It creates a certain like passivity in a lot of ways, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
And a lot of tolerating all sorts of, it's really weird how it kind of makes you very future oriented. Like there's no point in the present moment. We're all just trying to get somewhere,
Yeah.
right? In a lot of ways.
Oh, this is an illusion.
yeah.
Our real life will happen after we
Exactly.
die.
After you die, all that stuff. Exactly. So what is your involvement in ex-Muslims in North America?
Yeah, so I am the director of operations. I've been on and off with the organization for about 8 years. I started as a volunteer, and then part-time I worked on the Normalizing Dissent tour, which brought ex-Muslim voices to college campuses across the US and Canada. And we made a lot of that's how a lot of people actually found out about us, was through the videos that we posted of these panel discussions. So ex-Muslims talking about, what it was like being in the faith and then leaving. And and then I transitioned to become a director of operations about 1.5 years ago. And it's some of the most emotionally exhausting but incredibly rewarding work I have ever done.
Wow. And it's exhausting because of the stories you're constantly hearing or the uphill battle that you have to.
Both. I mean, I'm still to this day getting very tepid reactions from people who, you would think would be very happy to hear from another secular atheist organization who is committed to human rights. But as soon as they hear like the ex-Muslim label, they don't want to be labeled racist themselves by associating with us. So it's like a weird dance that we do with organizations and in our advocacy. We are nonpartisan. And so we're not like politically affiliated with any group, and nor do we plan to be. We have to walk a very, very fine line, but but then also I'm sort of always like fighting off any attempts to co-opt our message to like further, an anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, xenophobic agenda, while also trying to get people on the left to be able to like listen to us, like literally listen to what I'm saying, and, on our legitimate concerns, like free speech cannot belong to any one party because then it's weaponized against the other. And like, it's a principle and a right that belongs to all of us. And that includes listening to things that make us uncomfortable, including criticism of a religion.
Which ironically is the one that is far more oppressive. Like it's just such a weird battle to be fighting, right?
It's bonkers. So like, and just because it is a predominantly Black and brown religion, they don't want to hear it because they're really afraid of being labeled racist. And it's like, please think about what you're saying. Islam is not a race and neither are Muslims.
It's fascinating. Yeah, that's a really interesting glimpse, and I really appreciate this. Are you saying then, I'm basically hearing this, but it's actually harder to penetrate the message into the left than it is to the right?
I think, I mean, That's a good question. I don't know if it's harder, but there are different sets of obstacles, right? Like
The right's going to co-opt it, and the left
the
is going to ignore you.
yeah, so it's like we do a very delicate dance with a lot of people. But we're trying to enter more into the free speech space. I feel like that's become sort of a little bit more neutral territory very, very, very recently. So it's I think people sort of understand it from that perspective, which is, we can't limit speech, that especially like criticism of religion, right? Like everyone should be watchful. We sh-
Yeah. It reminds me of my brother and I have been talking a lot about this. I'm in the process and fairly fresh out of deconstructing Zionism. And one of Zionism's very interesting parallel to this is Zionism has ridden the wave of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a racist, it is linked to race, but Zionism says we're going to link this to race, where Zionism is not. It's a nationalist ideology. But
Mhm.
they've made a committed effort over decades to link the two, and then is able to throw accusations of racism against anybody who's anti-Zionist. So the parallels I find very fascinating. They use slightly different mechanics,
Yeah.
right? But the end result is the same, where that's done against you. And in fact, very similarly, people who are otherwise liberal criticize me for being anti-Zionist, not directly because there's anything wrong with my message, but because it can be fuel
Yeah.
for other people who are actually going to do damage or who are more radical than I am. So any message of actual criticism must be shut down for fear that it's going to be co-opted, which I also resonate with.
Yeah, yeah, we're operating in a very interesting time period where, there is a very small window where our message can be heard by both the people on the right and the left, because that's exactly how I open the conversations with people on the left, which is like, it's just like conflating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. Like, one is an idea, a nation state, rather, and another is a people. So you want to protect people while still reserving the right to be able to criticize a country, right? So it's the same thing. And then they're like, "Oh, I get it." And it's like, "Okay, great. Well, can you now stop using the word Islamophobia?" That's another hurdle, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's how it's
Exactly.
yeah, I'm able to
Yeah.
find that parallel.
It's interesting that you actually have been using it in a conversation. I find that validating. Yeah. One random question that I was going to ask you earlier, but the fact that you had a boyfriend while still somewhat religious, that was already kind of more liberal than other people would be, right? That was already kind of.
I mean, I was not open about that relationship, and so, like, it was like, there were very few people in my family who knew about it, and it's not something that I ever was open about or flaunted in my family. It was still considered taboo. Now I feel like it's okay now, like, with the younger generation, and I mean, like, Gen V folks, like, to have a boyfriend. I maybe in some communities more than others, but in my family, it's okay. As long as the person is Muslim, it's okay. But the
Hmm.
expectation always is if you say that you are with this person, then you are marrying them within the year.
Right.
Like, you're not just bringing home any boyfriend, it's like the guy that you're marrying.
Yeah. So but I guess I haven't asked you this directly, but like you're not out as an ex-Muslim, I'm assuming, to anybody, not even your family, but you're married to a non-Muslim person.
Yeah.
Isn't that like an obvious indicator?
Yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, I think people understand that I have a very, like, a complicated relationship with religion, or that I'm not as religious as they are. But when I first got married, I did tell people that my husband was not converting, and that was a huge issue because Islamically, my marriage is not recognized, and I'm essentially living in sin. But there were some people in an effort to save face who said that he did convert, but I've never had anyone ask me whether he is or isn't, and we just sort of, you know, keep it moving. We don't really answer anybody's question, or nobody's asked us any questions about
You
it.
let their denial fill in the blanks. I've seen this a lot. When
Exactly.
religious people, they need you to fit in their worldview and they will bend over backwards. My mother does this a lot of like, deep down, you're still religious and you still believe in God. And I can tell because I don't know, whatever the proof is at the time, you know?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's like, okay, well, we just, we'll leave her alone. And I'm like, great, I want to be left alone.
Exactly. When you were with your boyfriend and it was a secret, did you feel guilty on some level? Because,
I didn't like lying. I mean, I still, I really hate lying. Like it's a thing that I like, even to my own children, I don't lie to them. Like almost to a fault. Like my husband's like, you can just tell them a little white lie. I'm like, I cannot betray their trust like that, right? Like then it's a slippery slope. So I always tell them the truth. And I really did not like it. And it's not because I felt like, oh, I'm going against my religion. It was more that despite all of this, and I'm very grateful for this, but I have a really, really good relationship with my mom. She doesn't know I'm an ex-Muslim, but she knows that I don't follow their religion. And she has really, like, to her, religion is very, very personal. She's a deeply spiritual person. She's religious, but she's also very, very accepting. And she's great. I'm very, very lucky. I recognize that more and more in my conversations with my friends. It was just like, I'm disappointing her. I'm hurting her. And I just didn't like it. And then, eventually, like, my husband and I were like, no, we're together for the long haul. Like, and then we came clean. And, when I told my mom, she burst into tears. And I was like, oh, fuck. And I was like, why are you crying? She's like, I'm just so happy for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's when right? It's at that moment when they can just prioritize your happiness over the
Yeah.
religion. That's kind of like what separates the groups.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that also helped me not be. I think a lot of people in their journey out of Islam or a new religion, they're just very angry for a very long time. And they're just like, there's also like an element of like internalized racism or bigotry that happens, or you're like, you hate everything about your former religion, including the people who still follow it. And I didn't really ever experience that, because by and large, though my family are becoming more and more conservative, they're still really good people. I really love hanging out with them. I love my family. I love them truly. They're just really, really nice people. They follow a fucked up religion, but despite that, they're still really nice people, and they're, hardworking individuals. They're professionals. They lead successful lives, and they're nice and they're kind. And so I didn't have that disenfranchised like period of my life where I was like, no, fuck Muslims and fuck Islam. I was just like, I didn't go through that. And I recognize I'm very, very, very lucky. And the reason I'm still an ex-Muslim is that I feel like because I love them, I know they'll be hurt. But then eventually I'll have to, be honest with myself too. And, I'm considering slowly starting to like come out to them. I think also they need to hear it. They think that ex-Muslims are lost and wayward, and maybe they do view me in that way, but we're like aimless and we're damaged and this and that. Not that like we exist in the periphery of their communities, where we live in the shadows. We're part of them. And like, I still deserve a seat at their table, like the community table. Like, I'm still part of that community. I just don't believe in that religion. I'm still in your family. And you should be able to like, if you can respect me and have conversations with me and engage with me, knowing that I'm not a religious person, I would hope you're still able to do that, knowing that I am not a part of that religion, but still a part of your family. Like, I hope that love doesn't change.
Yeah. I mean, I hope so.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
kudos to you for that journey. Two last questions for you. One is a clarification about earlier. When this radicalization happened around 9/11, was it the 9/11 attack, or was it the response that came afterwards? Whether that's cultural, social, invading other countries.
It was all of that.
Just the attack itself already caused people to become more Muslim, even though theoretically Islam was the perpetrator. And
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think what they were doing was, well, what does Islam really, well, I'm being told that Islam was the cause of this, and that people are quote unquote cherry picking verses that justified, what the attackers did, why they flew the plane into the towers. And then people who sort of were culturally Muslim like me were then forced to be confront, okay, what is Islam? What is it actually saying? And in order to do that, we read that this is the most perfect word of God. And in order to get to heaven, you have to do everything that's in this book. And so that means covering, that means segregating, that means, if you're a woman, staying at home and listening to your husband, and all eating halal and making sure you're only going to halal establishments, and, I have family friends who like took out halal mortgages because interest is haram, and then you're like, that's just a regular mortgage. That's just was Sharia compliant. It's the same
Yeah.
thing. You're lying to yourself.
What's the way that the Jews have their own tricks? How do you make a mortgage halal?
Oh, it's so funny. I just met someone who works for a credit union who was like, oh yeah, this totally exists. We have like separate accounts for people that are Sharia compliant. I actually don't know the answer to that question. I'm definitely going to look into it. I think that they just use another name for it. It's like there's
So,
some stupid workaround. They just like slap
oh
Sharia
yeah,
on it and then
the workarounds are amazing. In Judaism, first of all, in banks in Israel, on the wall is a rabbinical certificate in every bank in Israel that says, like, the rabbis have signed off on all the mortgages. So you don't have to pick and choose because the whole country, I'm sure Saudi Arabia probably has that too. And the way, if I recall from Jewish law that I had to study when I was like 15, it's a theoretical loophole that theoretically says that we're actually in business together. It's basically turning it from a bond to a stock. Essentially that this isn't a debt, we're partners and you're giving us the dividends from this business called your house. Theoretically, that means that they couldn't collect, right? Because that's the flip side. If it goes down, we go down together. And then of course they still do. And that's the part I can't explain to you how they actually do that. But that is the loophole in their mind that was created along the way. So that's that. But okay, so it sounds like, if I was to summarize that basically Al-Qaeda, bin Laden created this wake-up call that drew attention to Islam in a way that people couldn't look away. And by looking at it, we're actually radicalized by the text itself because the text is radical. So he actually, pretty genius. I don't know if that's what he had in mind, but it's pretty successful.
Yeah, and I'm now, I'm seeing this like this trend, especially amongst young Muslim men, to become more and more conservative, which is what's happening amongst Christians as well. That they're becoming more and more polarized. So you have like, this growing movement amongst young Christian men to go back to the church and become, more family values and, trad wives and all this other stuff. That shit's also happening within Muslim communities.
Yeah.
And then they're also realizing, wait, the left doesn't represent our Islamic values. The right actually does. So you're now seeing that at the ballot box, where Muslims are now voting for Republican policies and for Republican candidates who themselves have their own anti-Muslim, bias. And it's just like, what is happening? It's just bonkers. It's absolute bonkers to me.
Yeah.
But it makes sense.
The shooting yourself in the foot because of your, like, some of it values, like liberal Jews vote for Trump because the Israel piece, right? They have to make these loopholes in their head. Every aspect of what he stands for doesn't stand, but Israel's at the top of their religion, basically. And so that happens. So I hear that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I saw, that's I heard family members saying that they were going to vote for Trump because he'll fix the Middle East crisis. And I was like, how? So now the Republicans have like Muslims, Jews, and then neo-Nazis. And it's just like everyone hates everyone, but they're all in this tent together. They're all like, fulfilling their own prophecies. It's crazy.
I heard the term horseshoe effect. I don't know if you're familiar with that. When you come full circle in your radicalism and you're actually back to the starting point, but you got there by going 360 in the other direction.
Yes.
And it describes that. I was accidentally ended up in a anti-vaxxer like summer festival a couple of years ago. And I was just fascinated that the two people in the camp were the kind of like extreme hippies. Don't talk to me about medicine. And like these right-wing kind of like, the government needs to get their hands off of me. And they were collaborating because they agreed on this one issue, right?
Yeah.
There's only one political party in Canada that really is anti-vax, and they're far right. And so all the hippies were voting far right for this one thing. I love when that happens.
It's crazy. All these very strange bedfellows. All of them.
So what would be your advice for somebody in that, on their ex-Muslim journey, if you will, somewhere along the way, doubting or actively taking steps?
That's a good question. I would go back to what I had said previously about trusting your own intuition and how that's not the whisperings of the devil. That's not you being weakened by your own earthly desires. that's actually you. That's your inner light trying to shine and tell you that you are a better person than what Islam is asking of you. That's what I would say, that you are a better person than Islam. And that's what your doubts are.
I love
That's
that.
you.
I love that. Well, I work, one of my specialties, I work as a hypnotherapist, and one of my specialties is religious trauma. And one of the things that I constantly need to work on, like one of the fundamentals of healing from religious trauma is trust in self, right? You've
Yeah.
negated yourself the entire time, which causes more trauma for yourself because you haven't listened to your own self. It leads to things like moral injury, where you basically have done bad things because it's been a hypothetical gun to your head for parts of
Yeah.
it. And so, yeah, learning to listen to yourself is a huge part of the journey. I'm reminded earlier, we were talking about this. I don't know if you knew this. There's a form of OCD, a flavor of OCD called religious OCD. It's called scrupulosity. When you're
Mhm.
scrupulous and detail oriented because religion tells you to. And obviously, if you have OCD tendencies beforehand and you add religion into it, it takes it to a whole other level. So I always found that interesting. There's like an entire flavor.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Some of like the most religious people in my family are like highly anxious. Highly. And I don't know if it's like, a snake eating its own tail, like what's causing what, but it's just like, yeah, it's just all consuming. But what it does is it just, like you said, it destroys your sense of self, and that you think that, oh no, I need something to tell me what to do, how to live my life, how to, I need something to guide me at all times. Like Islam is like in many, I'm sure you can relate as an ex-Jew, but like there are ways to like enter and exit a bathroom. There are prayers that you recite. You must exit with your left foot. No, sorry. Enter with your left foot and exit with your right foot while reciting these prayers. It's like you can find a solution and a problem with a solution for everything and a problem with everything. It's like it's entirely possible.
Yeah. And the bathroom prayer was the one that took the longest to kick. It was so habitual when you walk out of the bathroom to have an instinct to say it. And it took me years to actually kick that. And again, I don't think Christians really get it, because Christians do not have an obsession. Same, left and right. I know you guys have this too, with which hand you wipe your butt basically with. We have that.
Mhm. Eat, yeah, and
Which
you eat with your
which
right hand.
put on first, all of that level, and really kind of ties into Islam more, and people don't get it. So yeah, here we are shining
Yeah.
light on it.
I was like talking to my family member who was like, well, there is a dua that you're supposed to recite while having sex. And I was like, even then? Even then I need to be thinking about fucking God. God's me.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah,
funny.
amazing. And on that note, thank you so much, Aysha, for sharing your story. Keep up the great work that you guys are doing. It's a whole extra level. I always say this: to be ex-Muslim is a whole other level of commitment and what's the word? Like, how commendable it is on another level compared to any other religion that people left, I believe.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, thank you, thank you. I am incredibly privileged to be in this position. I think the true like freedom fighters, people who actually try and they fight valiantly against Islam, are people who live in Muslim countries who do this under actual oppression. So really, I stand on their shoulders for sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond Belief. If you found the episode inspiring, please share it with others who might benefit from it, and be sure to subscribe to it to get updates about future episodes.